Welcome back to VidZet. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Once again, I have our legal expert, Dr. Bill Hodes, on with us, professor of constitutional law at Indiana University and instructor in constitutional law for our vice president. Today, we're talking about a little bit different subject. This week, the Supreme Court ruled in a case that deals with a rock band. This is an Asian rock band that had decided to choose the name the Slants. They wanted to trademark that name, and the Patent and Trademark Office, in accordance with statute, said, this is a disparaging name, and we can't give you a trademark. Well, this case went through the courts, and ultimately the Supreme Court ruled on it. And the ruling was 8-0. It wasn't a divided court, it was a unanimous court. Bill, would you please tell us a little more about what's going on in this?
It was significant but not surprising that it was an 8-0 decision because the Supreme Court and the courts generally actually have been, for the most part, very, very united on their view of the First Amendment, other than in the elections context, where there's a huge debate about whether giving cash is the same as enabling people to speak and so on.
United case.
And others. There are several others, whether judges campaign and so on. But in pure, in situations in which what's going on is that the government is dictating what people can and cannot say based upon the content of what they're saying, the courts for a very long time, 20, 30 years, have been quite uniform in saying, no, that is exactly the point of the First Amendment, is to take that off the table. The First Amendment, of course, is the Free Speech Clause. And there's a line in Justice Alito's opinion for the court which sort of encapsulates that very nicely. He says, look, the whole point of the First Amendment is that the government cannot do something to you, can't punish you, can't withhold something.
Right.
Simply because you've said something offensive.
Well, this is kind of echoing what Thomas Jefferson said. I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Samuel Alito's decision literally says, and here it is, quote, this provision violates the free speech clause of the First Amendment. It offends a bedrock First Amendment principle. Speech may not be banned on the ground that it expresses ideas that offend. Close.
That's right. And then the traditional follow-up to that is, if the ideas didn't offend somebody, you wouldn't need the First Amendment.
That's right.
It's only the speech that we don't like that we have to steel ourselves and say, exactly as Jefferson said, I don't like it, but I'm not going to shut you down.
Yeah. So the First Amendment then exists to protect offensive speech, pure and simple.
Correct. And the remedy for, if I just add one thing, the traditional comeback is, if you don't like the speech, then you exercise your free speech and you write an editorial on the other side, or you march, you chant, you do whatever you need to do.
The remedy for offensive speech is more speech.
Right, and offensive or not, doesn't matter. But you counter speech with speech.
Right.
But the government cannot be the one who shuts you down.
Okay, so now the Slants get their trademark. Does this affect any other prominent cases?
Well, certainly and most of the headlines have said this, the Washington Redskins, who had their trademark revoked under the same provision, my guess is that they're already filed papers to get that trademark.
Oh, yeah, the owner of the Washington Redskins published a celebration the moment this came down.
Okay, well, that doesn't surprise
me.
me.
And the Cleveland Indians are under fire because, oh my goodness, they have a disparaging name. And they're going to tell people now, sorry, We're not
Right.
listening to you.
And by the way, and again, part of the idea of the First Amendment is there may be people who are offended by any of these names, and there are lots of college teams that have those names. Their remedy is don't go to the games.
Exactly.
Don't buy the jerseys, or whatever it
Right.
is.
Okay.
You
Now,
respond with more speech.
those are the issues that are directly related to the case. But are there some other issues? For example, you talked about college football. Are there other issues on college campuses that come out of this?
I think so. I think there have, of course, already been many cases, but this will be an impetus to much more, that have frowned on speech codes.
Janet Napolitano, who is president of the University of California system, published a list of how you're supposed to say various things. What's going to happen to things like that?
Well, I think you have to distinguish between sort of what is the level of the restriction that the government,
She says
of course.
it's not permissible to use certain terms.
Okay, and what
most
happens?
of them are fairly innocuous.
But what happens if you violate that edict? That's the question. See, if
Students can be expelled, professors can be fired.
Oh, well, if I wasn't sure about what
No,
the,
that's the penalty that's
okay.
in all this.
Then clearly those will be she will have to rescind that, or the courts will do it for her. But the counterexample I was going to give, suppose that she wises up and says, okay, there are not going to be any consequences, but as your president of the university, here's a list of things that I think you shouldn't be saying. That's not the California way.
Okay.
That's fine, because then she's exercising her own free speech. She's saying, my suggestion to you is don't use these offensive words.
Yes, but see,
when she
it's
tries
a
to back it up,
opinion,
right,
as opposed to
well, it's more than a
legal guidance.
She's a public figure, and she's the president, so what she says is designed to have some impact. But when she flips over to backing it up with sanctions, so that if you don't obey me because I'm smart and because you agree with me, if you refuse to obey, then I'm going to punish you. That's gone. That is going to be gone.
So college speech codes are basically going to go away. On the other side, what about safe spaces?
Safe spaces, I think, are, again, they're kind of silly, and maybe a lot of people would exercise their right to free speech and say that it's a waste of taxpayers' money and we shouldn't do that. But again, that is simply, and what safe spaces are, if I'm a student and I claim that some other student offended me, I can go have hot cocoa and on the taxpayers' money.
And you're warmed up, you get a little rubber room to get into.
That's right. And you see, but that doesn't violate the First Amendment, because you're not negating the right of the speaker to speak.
Right.
You're taking care of the, quote, victim.
You're just wasting money.
You're wasting money. That's right. It's taxpayers' money. But if you said, to go, in effect, going back to the Napolitano example, if you said the people who were victimized, A, they get hot cocoa, and B, we're going to either expel or impose some discipline on the person who made the offensive speech, that's gone.
All right. So, in sum, this was a victory for freedom.
For free, absolutely.
Nothing says there's no question about this one. Even
correct.
Though one commentator declared that this was a victory for state-sponsored hate speech.
It's not. No, actually, that's very interesting. It's the opposite. What it is it may very well be a victory for the right of people to engage in hate speech, but it's not state-sponsored.
Right.
It's merely that the state can't stop it.
Right.
That's the point of the First Amendment.
All right. Well, a blow for freedom. We can use more of those. Once again, thanks for being with us. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and visit us at vidzet.com. Until next time.